It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. With us now, Leqaa Kordia, who was recently freed for more than a year in ICE detention. Originally from East Jerusalem, then in more recent years from Paterson, New Jersey, Leqaa had become the longest detained person who had been taken into custody for deportation in connection with the pro-Palestinian protest at Columbia University. She had no criminal record. Her mother is a U.S. citizen. Leqaa was applying for legal permanent resident status on that basis. And she was one of those people who was taken to a detention center in Prairieville, Texas, so far from her home and family in the Northeast. She has a lot to say now about conditions at that detention center, too, in addition to her opinions about why the Trump administration wants to deport her and about the situation in the Middle East. We'll get to all of each, or some of each, I should say. Judges twice ruled that she should at least be freed on bond, but the Trump administration used technicalities to keep her locked up anyway. An immigration judge ruled there was no evidence to support the government's claim that she was sending money to Hamas. The court found she was sending money to family members and found no connection to any terrorist organization. Mayor Zohran Mamdani personally asked President Trump for Leqaa's release when the two men met at the White House last month. Finally, there came a third court ruling that she should be released on bond while her deportation case continues. This time, the government did not appeal, and so Leqaa Kordia is now back in New Jersey, detained in March of last year, released in March of this. Leqaa Kordia joins us now, along with an attorney who represents her, Sarah Sherman-Stokes, a clinical associate professor at the Boston University School of Law. If we may go by first names, Leqaa and Sarah, welcome to WNYC.
Hi, Brian. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you so much for having us.
Leqaa, would you like to tell us a little bit of your coming to America and coming to New Jersey story first? I see it was about 10 years ago. Why was that at the time?
Yes, so I grew up in the West Bank, an occupied West Bank, and my mother, she lives in America for like almost 30 years or more now. The reason why I came to America is to be reunited with my mother at last, after like more than 20 years almost.
I read that you went to school at a career training program in Bergen County, later left that program, and you were working as a waitress to help support your mother and your brother. Do I have that all right?
Yes.
And Sarah, will you pick up some of the legal story here? I read that Leqaa's student visa had expired and she was applying for a green card based on her mother's being a U.S. citizen. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And where was she in that process when she was detained by ICE?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having us, and thank you for telling helping to amplify Leqaa's story. Leqaa came, as she said, to reunite with her U.S. citizen mother and U.S. citizen family members, as so many immigrants do. That process can take a very long time. A visa petition, a family petition had been filed. Leqaa was waiting for a visa to become current. This process can take years for many families, as it did in Leqaa's case. And in fact, she is still waiting for a visa to become available so that she can adjust her status and get a green card through her mother through this lawful process.
And I read she was also one of those people seized by ICE when she showed up for a routine immigration proceeding. Do I have it right that ICE picked her up at a scheduled check-in in her green card application process?
Well, ICE arrested her at the Newark field office, and I want to be clear that ICE targeted her because of her pro-Palestine advocacy and because she is Palestinian. They targeted her like they've targeted so many others, Rumeysa Ozturk, Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen Madawi, and most recently several others, including a Muslim leader in Milwaukee. This is a pattern that we've seen from this administration for the last many months.
Right. And how is it that they took a 33-year-old woman who is working to help support her mother and brother in New Jersey all the way to a detention center in Prairieville, Texas? There's a detention center right here in Newark, for example, if they needed one.
So, this is a concerted effort by the government to separate people from their friends, family, and community members and send them to distant detention centers where not only will they have less access to the people who love and support them, but they will also have less access to lawyers, and they will be held in circuits like the Fifth Circuit that are much less favorable to immigrants. This is by design. It's an effort to deter people from pursuing their meritorious and credible cases. It's designed to wear people down and push them to give up and withdraw their claims for relief. Leqaa, like many others, is incredibly strong and resilient, and she didn't give up. But that is what the government is trying to coerce people into doing by sending them to these distant detention centers.
How did you come to represent her?
So it's important to note that Leqaa is represented by and has been represented by an incredible team of lawyers. That includes folks from Texas Civil Rights Project and CLEAR and Muslim Advocates and Waters Krause in Texas and the BU Immigrants' Rights Clinic. Leqaa's legal team reached out to me and asked if I would come on to represent her in her immigration removal proceedings, and I did not hesitate.
Leqaa, do you recall what they told you when you were detained? Did they tell you what their claim against you was regarding your politics or why they were taking you to Texas?
No, all what they told me is that I have an issue with my application. So basically, it's only about the petition from my mother. They didn't tell me anything else. I was surprised actually when I went to my first court and I heard all these allegations, and I was like, "You guys told me it's just an issue with my application." So basically, they were lying to me.
You weren't a student at Columbia, but you went there to join the protests, I understand. Tell us why you joined those protests.
No, I wasn't a student at Columbia. Well, I'm a Palestinian. That's a first. I lost nearly 200 family members. I was protesting. I took to the street to protest against the ongoing genocide, to call for a free Palestine, to call for my rights and my people's rights and my family's rights, to call for a ceasefire, to lift the siege on Gaza. At that time, I felt very helpless, and this is a very awful feeling, by the way, that the only choice that I had actually is to take to the street and call for end of the genocide and the ceasefire.
And people disagree on whether the word genocide applies, but obviously so many thousands of civilians have been killed in Gaza, no matter what anyone calls it, in Israel's campaign to destroy Hamas. And you are living in the West Bank, which is broadly recognized as an occupied territory. And you just said here, as I know you've said before, that you had so many family members killed in Gaza. So my extreme condolences, for whatever it's worth, for anyone you lost to the war. Do you want to describe any of the circumstances of that as you understand them, or would you rather not?
I'd rather not, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. But you've said you will now also advocate for what you called the ladies I left behind, meaning in ICE detention in Texas. Is that advocate for their release or advocate for better conditions in the prison, or both?
It's both, but it's actually advocate more for the release, because I believe that we shouldn't have ICE detentions in the first place. It should be illegal. People shouldn't be held for months or years just simply because they pursued the American dream, just because they dreamt of a better future for them and their families. Because I took to the streets in 2024 and before 2024 too, to advocate for my on the behalf of my family in Palestine, on behalf of my rights, and now I'm advocating on the behalf of my other family here. I consider these ladies as family, not just somebody that I call for their rights. I left behind many courageous, beautiful ladies who all what they did is to dream, and dreaming shouldn't be something wrong.
I see that you've compared your time in ICE detention to life for Palestinians under occupation. In what ways do you mean that?
Yes, like for example, taking children in this ICE detention. And by the way, I don't like the word detention. Detention is very nice word to describe these places. It's more of a jail system. Like I like to call them dungeons, actually. So many similarities between the Israeli army methods and ICE agents' methods. For example, when it comes the shackles, the humiliation, stripping people out of their dignity, calling us subjects, for example, calling us by a number, not a name. As I mentioned before, arresting children. As you may know, Israel is the only country in the world that arrests children and put them in military prisons, and most of the time without trials. Same what happens with ICE. So many children are in ICE jail. A lot of people are being held without any trial. They didn't see a judge or anything for months. Same, it's happening in the Israeli prisons with Palestinian prisoners. They've been being held without trials for years. No allegations, nothing. Also, like the conditions, like while I was in jail, the ICE jail, most of the time I will think of the Palestinian prisoners. And believe it or not, I would actually feel ashamed to complain of my condition, although it's horrible and no human being should live under these circumstances. It's basically what's happening now in ICE jails. It's a humanitarian crisis. But I would feel ashamed to even complain about anything, knowing that thousands of Palestinians are being held in these horrific Israeli prisons, military prisons, being tortured, starved, humiliated, and abused every single day, stripped out of their dignity, their rights, any human right, basically. Like the conditions in ICE detentions, or as I like to call them, ICE dungeons, are really horrific. Even me, as a person who I consider myself watching the news and trying to follow, I was surprised and shocked actually by the conditions. I was with with a lot of ladies, about 100 lady, for example, in a room, that it's actually the capacity of this room, it's 37 people should be in this room, but we were overcrowded. I myself slept on the floor for 3 months straight. I didn't have a bed or something. We didn't have pillows, for example. I was denied my religious rights, such as the Holy Quran or prayer mat or prayer beads. Or, for example, I experienced also 2 Ramadans in ICE detention, and my experience was horrible. I remember 3 days of my first Ramadan. They didn't bring me any food, and when I kept complaining and asking for food, at the end they told me kitchen's closed. And then it comes the kindness and how kind these women with me who were detained with me, they were giving me their food that they bought from commissary. And by the way, commissary is really ridiculously expensive. So I would have pregnant ladies, for example, with me who sleep on paper-thin mattresses, without pillows, without medical care, without nutrition. Talking about nutrition, food there is horrible. They don't give us vegetables. They don't give us fruits. We used to call it, as detainees, we used to call it dog's food. Even some of the detainees with me, they would tell me, even this food, I don't even give it to my dog, even. We would have things swimming in the water. For example, also the showers stopped working for almost 2 weeks or so. And when we were complaining, the sergeant would say, "It is what it is." And some of the lieutenants, some of the sergeants or guards, they will even tell us to be thankful for what we have, to be thankful for the paper-thin mattress that we have, or like for the food, the horrible food that they used to give us, and all of that. When we ask, for example, for cough drops, if you're coughing, or like simple things like this, it will be denied. And one of the people who work in medical care, which, by the way, they don't have doctors or nurses, they have who's under the nurse. They will tell us, no, you can't get a cough drop. Cough drops, actually, we use it to treat COVID or something like that. And it was like, oh, wow, you treat COVID with cough drops.
Let me jump in and follow up on some of the things that you said, and also bring your lawyer back into it on some of those horrible conditions that you're describing. First, to follow up on something you said earlier about children being held in Israeli prisons. Time magazine, confirming that, reports as of late 2025, over 350 Palestinian children are held in Israeli military detention, with many subjected to administrative detention without charge or trial. That's from Time magazine. And going back to you, Sarah, as Leqaa's lawyer, and listeners, if you're just joining us, we're talking primarily with Leqaa Kordia, who was recently freed from more than a year in ICE detention, the longest held of those detained in connection with the pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. But Sarah, what we just heard, these allegations about conditions at the ICE detention center in Texas, is this something that can be challenged in court, or is being challenged in court as cruel and unusual punishment, or under any other law?
Thank you so much, Brian. And I just want to reiterate one thing that Leqaa said, which is those similarities that she highlighted. And I did want to note for your listeners that according to the Marshall Project, as of early 2026, over 3,800 children have been booked into ICE detention during this second Trump administration. So the United States, like Israel, also jails children. Those are our tax dollars at work. With regard to Leqaa's reports of the horrific detention conditions, this is consistent with what I hear from all of my clients across the country. Many of these jails are run by private prison companies whose desire is simply to make a profit over off the people that they are detaining. Today, as I speak to you, there are over 68,000 people in ICE custody across the United States. That is a huge boon to the private prison industry, to private prison corporations who want to spend as little as possible on jailing human beings, providing them with very minimal medical care, providing them with very minimal nutrition, providing them with dirty and unsanitary conditions, and then deporting them as quickly as they can. So I'm not surprised to hear Leqaa's reports about detention. There are lawsuits challenging these kinds of conditions, but I think the larger question is there anything we can really do to make jail more humane? And my answer would be no, that people should not be detained, that 68,000 human beings, including 3,800 children, should not be detained for civil immigration violations, and that ICE detention should be abolished.
Sarah, we had Mohsen Madawi on the show, another Columbia protester whose case has been in the news. He described his detention, which took place a year ago this month, like this.
This was on April 14th of 2025, a long-waited for interview for my citizenship. Now, the background of it is I've been in this country for about 11 years. I came to this country legally. I went through multiple background checks at different stages. I've been a green card holder for the past 10 years. I've worked in this country, paid taxes. I studied at the best institutions of this country, and I've never committed a crime. I've respected the law of this country. So after roughly 11 years of being in this country, I applied for a citizenship, and I received my invitation. It was on the day of April 14th.
Mohsen Madawi here in December. Sarah, for you as Leqaa's lawyer, how much do you see the legal questions in her case and Mohsen Madawi's case as similar or the same? And I'll note for our listeners that, as I understand it, neither case is resolved. They're just out on bond while the deportation claims proceed. So how would you describe the status of Leqaa's case right now, and is it the same basically as Mohsen's?
Thank you for that question. Mohsen and Leqaa, like many of the others targeted, entered the United States lawfully. They came here on visas or green cards. Like Mohsen, Leqaa has been here in the United States for over a decade. Like Mohsen, Leqaa is Palestinian. They grew up in the occupied West Bank. And like Mohsen, Leqaa is being targeted because she is Palestinian and because of her pro-Palestine activism. She is being targeted for First Amendment protected speech. And that is similar across all of the people that the United States government has targeted in the last several months in particular. As you mentioned, Leqaa's case is ongoing. Although she is free, and we're so relieved that she's free, she is not out of the woods. She has an ongoing removal case, and we will continue fighting her removal. She has been granted withholding of removal. An immigration judge found that she would be persecuted by the Israeli government if she were removed there. That case was appealed by the Department of Homeland Security, and we will continue to fight that case in the courts. And we will continue to advocate for her right to speak out in support of a free Palestine.
The government argues that immigration law gives it the right to deport non-citizens if their activities could be seen as contributing to, quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. Is that the case they're trying to make explicitly against Leqaa?
The government has completely abandoned any argument suggesting that Leqaa is a danger or poses a danger to the United States. They made false and erroneous and frankly dangerous allegations about her associations with terrorism early on in splashy press releases from the Department of Homeland Security. But there's no evidence whatsoever to back that up. And the government knows that. Yet they continue to doggedly pursue her case and make false public statements about her connections or suggested connections to dangerous activities. Nothing Leqaa has done, speaking out in support of Palestine, exercising her First Amendment rights, that is not adverse to foreign policy. It has not put the United States at danger. She's certainly just exercising her constitutional rights.
Leqaa, I read in the Columbia Spectator that after your release, you were at a pro-Palestinian protest leading chants of Palestine is our demand, no peace on stolen land. If that report is accurate, and if the government were to try to use that against you, saying no peace means you support violence, what would you say back?
I don't support any violence in any forms. I'm just calling for peace, actually, for my people. I'm calling for a ceasefire. I'm calling for the end of the genocide. I'm calling for a free Palestine. But at the same time, how you're expecting us as Palestinians to live in peace while we live in apartheid, under a military occupation. You go for through a checkpoint, a regular, not regular checkpoint, it's a military checkpoint, but on a regular day, because this is our normal life in Palestine. And you get killed just because the soldier is bored and he wants to have a little bit of fun. So how the world is expecting us to have peace with all these circumstances? It's it's hard.
Sarah, last question. What do you see as the broadest legal context of Leqaa's case regarding how the Trump administration is trying to change legal standards of the past?
Thanks, Brian. And I just want to lift up that all of what Leqaa has been saying is what many, many people, and in fact, more people every day have been saying and acknowledging. What's happening at the hands of the United States government and the Israeli government is a genocide. And people are well within their rights to speak up against that genocide and to call out the United States government and the Israeli government for the ways in which they are systematically eliminating the Palestinian people. And I would, as you suggest, situate this amidst a history of ideological deportation. We've been seeing ideological deportation in the United States for years. The recent wave of targeting pro-Palestine activists is new and extremely upsetting and unconstitutional, but it is not inconsistent with the past. The United States government has, in the past, targeted people whose opinions it doesn't like, and we stand firmly behind the belief that that's incorrect. That's in violation of the Constitution. Leqaa, like other activists, has the right to speak up for the things they believe in without consequence from the government, including detention and deportation.
Leqaa Kordia and attorney Sarah Sherman-Stokes from the Boston University Law School. Thank you both for joining us. Good luck to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. More in a minute.